All right, let's get right into it. Today we are exploring one of the biggest ideas in all of psychology. We're talking about the incredible journey our minds take, from being a brand new baby to a complex, problem-solving adult.
I mean, really stop and think about that for a second. How does a baby who sees the world as just a blur of light and sound eventually become someone who can, do calculus or debate philosophy? It feels almost impossible. But one man dedicated his entire life to figuring it out.
That man was Jean Piaget. And his big idea, the one that changed everything, was this. Children aren't just smaller, dumber versions of us. They aren't empty buckets that we just pour knowledge into. Nope, he said they are the architects of their own minds, constantly building and rebuilding their own intelligence from the ground up.
And let me tell you, this idea was absolutely revolutionary. It completely flipped the script on how we thought about childhood, about learning, and even about education itself.
This quote right here, it gets to the absolute core of his thinking. For Piaget, the point of learning wasn't to just memorize and repeat what's already been done. It was to build a mind that could think for itself, that could innovate, that could create something totally new.
So how does this whole building process actually work? Piaget said it comes down to two main things. First, there's just the natural process of our brains getting older and more developed. That's maturation. And second, there's our constant hands-on interaction with the world around us. So it's not just nature and it's not just nurture, it's the two working together.
Okay, so what's the actual engine that's driving all this change? To get it, Piaget gave us a brilliant way to think about it. Imagine our minds are being constructed, piece by piece, with something like mental Legos.
So the most basic building block he called a schema. A schema is basically a mental category or a blueprint. A baby is born with some of these, like a schema for how to suck. As a kid gets older, they build a schema for doggy. 4 legs, fur, a tail, it barks. It's like a mental shortcut that helps us make sense of the world without starting from scratch every single time.
Now, what happens when we see something new? Well, let's say that child with the doggy schema sees a different kind of dog, like a big golden retriever. It still has 4 legs and fur and it barks. It fits perfectly into their existing mental model. That process is called assimilation. The new Lego block just clicks right into place. Easy.
But what if that same child sees a cat for the first time? It's got 4 legs, it's got fur, but wait, it meows. It doesn't bark. It climbs trees differently. This new information just doesn't fit the doggy schema. And this forces the child to accommodate. They have to adjust their thinking, maybe even build a whole new cat schema right next to the doggy one. That moment of struggle and adjustment, that's accommodation. And that's where the real deep learning happens.
This whole thing is powered by a process Piaget called equilibration. See, our brains love it when everything makes sense, when our mental Lego tower is stable. That's equilibrium. But when new information comes along that doesn't fit, like the cat, it throws us off balance. We feel this mental itch, this disequilibrium. And that uncomfortable feeling is what motivates us to accommodate, to rebuild our tower so it makes sense again. That cycle, that drive to find balance, is the engine of our cognitive growth.
So, Piaget didn't just give us the Legos and the instruction manual. He also gave us a roadmap. He argued that all children, everywhere, move through 4 distinct stages of thinking, one after another, each one more sophisticated than the last.
And here is that roadmap, right here. It all starts with the sensorimotor stage, where it's all about senses and actions. Then comes the pre-operational stage, where the world is very self-centered. After that, the concrete operational stage, where logic finally kicks in. And finally, we hit the formal operational stage, where we can think about purely abstract ideas. Each one of these is a huge leap in how we see and understand the world.
In those first couple of years, it's all about learning through touching, tasting, and moving. But the absolute game changer in this stage is discovering object permanence. Think about peekaboo. Before this breakthrough, if a baby can't see something, it literally doesn't exist. Out of sight, out of mind. But once they get object permanence, they understand that even when mom's face is behind her hands, she's still there. The world suddenly becomes a much more stable and predictable place.
Next up, from about 2 to 7, is the pre-operational stage.
Here, kids start using symbols and language, but their thinking is still really focused on themselves. This is called egocentrism. It's not that they're selfish. They genuinely can't grasp that other people have different points of view. They also can't quite get the concept of conservation. You know, the classic experiment where you pour water from a short, fat glass into a tall, skinny one. They'll swear the tall glass has more water because they can only focus on one thing at a time, the height.
Around age 7, logic finally arrives. But, and this is a big but, it's a concrete logic. It has to be tied to real, physical objects they can see and manipulate. The big skill they master here is called class inclusion. They can finally understand that a category, like animals, can have subcategories, like dogs and cats. They get that all dogs are animals, but not all animals are dogs. That's a huge step toward more organized, systematic thinking.
And finally, from about age 11 onward, we hit the formal operational stage. This is where thinking truly takes flight. We're no longer tied to the concrete world. Now, our minds can wrestle with abstract concepts like justice, freedom, or infinity. We can think about hypotheticals, about what-if situations, and engage in complex moral reasoning. This is the kind of thinking that makes science, advanced math, and deep philosophical debates possible.
Okay, so that's the framework. It's elegant, it's powerful. But was Piaget right about everything? Of course not. So let's put the theory to the test and see where it holds up and where it starts to show some cracks.
One of the biggest debates is about language. Piaget was firm. He believed thought comes first. You have to understand the concept of, say, gone before you can say the word gone. But a contemporary of his, Lev Vygotsky, argued the exact opposite. He said that language and thought develop together, and that language is actually the main tool we use to build our thinking. It's a fundamental disagreement. Which comes first, the idea or the word?
So, if we're going to make a scorecard, here's how it breaks down. On the strengths side, Piaget's theory is still the most complete picture of cognitive development we have. The general idea of stages tied to biology is pretty well supported, and its impact on education has been massive. But there are weaknesses. His methods, often just observing his own kids, were not exactly rigorous science. The stages don't seem to be perfectly universal across all cultures, and that core idea of equilibration, it's a great concept, but it's really hard to prove it's actually happening in a lab.
And here's a great example of the methodology problem. Remember the conservation task where the researcher moves the counters and asks the kid if the number is the same? Well, a later study did something clever. They had a naughty teddy bear come in and accidentally mess up the row of counters. And guess what? The kids did way better at the task. This suggests that maybe the problem wasn't that the kids couldn't conserve the number, it was that Piaget's original experiment with the adult deliberately tricking them was just too confusing or socially weird for them.
But even with all these critiques, and they are valid, Piaget's legacy is monumental. We really can't overstate how much he changed our world. He's a true giant in the field.
So why this number? 1967? That was the year the Plowden Report came out in the UK. It was a hugely influential report that totally reshaped how elementary schools worked. And what was at its core? Piaget's ideas. The report pushed for active learning, for discovery, for learning by doing. His theories literally walked out of the textbook and into the classroom, changing education for millions of kids.
When you boil it all down, Piaget's greatest gift was a shift in perspective. He completely changed how we view children. Because of him, we stopped seeing them as these passive little things waiting to be programmed. Instead, we started seeing them for what they are. Curious, active little scientists, running experiments on the world every single day to try and figure it all out.
And that really brings us to a final thought for you. Because this process of accommodation, of feeling that disequilibrium and then rebuilding your mental models, it doesn't just stop when you turn 12. We do it our entire lives, every time we learn something new that challenges us. So if your mind is still a construction site, what are you building next?